writing fighting fantasy and for making Tomb Raider and Hitman happen. So thank you so much. Please, big applause. So first things first. Oh, let's go back. Yeah, that's a bunch of games you have.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for your very kind applause. I'm really delighted to be here. I have a particular fondness for Spain. I had a house here for some 20 years in La Manga, so quiero una cerveza, gambas a la plancha. And of course, I'm here to talk about my life in games. It's 50 years since we started Games Workshop. It was a long time ago. And today, as it happens, is the launch in the UK of the hardback edition, the collector's hardback edition of The Wall of Firetop Mountain, the very first Fighting Fantasy game book. But a lot has happened in those 50 years, and I look forward to talking to David about what happened. Here we have a little glimpse of my collection of games at home. I have 1,500 board games. This is just a small section. And quite a few Lara Crofts around the house, which kind of irritates my wife quite a lot, but there we are. I can't deny my life's work. So over to you, David.
Let's talk about bringing D&D to Europe. How did that come up? How did that happen? And I think there's a really nice writing story behind it.
Yeah. Well, this photograph you hear, this was back in February 1975, when we started Games Workshop, 3 of us, old school friends. On the far side is Steve Jackson, John Peake in the middle, and the really handsome guy on this side, that's me. And we want to turn our passion of playing games into some sort of business. And John was a craftsman. He used to make wooden games, and I would sell them to game shops. And Steve would do the administration. But we found that a little, not really what we wanted to do. We wanted to make games that we enjoyed playing ourselves. And so we decided to publish a magazine. This full color glossy here you see is the very first issue of Owl and Weasel, which we published in 1975. And we printed like 50 copies. We sent out free to everybody we knew in games, and somehow, by some sort of miracle, a copy landed on the desk of this gentleman in the middle. That was Gary Gygax. And he wrote to us and sent us a copy of his game, Dungeons & Dragons, which he created with Dave Arneson. The game didn't look much. It was a very plain box, but when you opened up the lid, it opened up your imagination like no game had ever done before, and I don't think any game ever will again. The very first role-playing game. I presume everybody in this room knows what Dungeons & Dragons is. I don't have to explain what a role-playing game is, which is really great. By the way, my first character was Anvar the Barbarian. He's a little old now, but he's still alive and well. He has a walking stick instead of a spear, yeah. But he's okay. So we played it. Steve and I became obsessed with Dungeons & Dragons. We ordered 6 copies because that's all the money we had. And on the back of that huge order, Gygax gave us an exclusive distribution agreement for the whole of Europe because he was also operating out of the flat at that time. So this is the birth of the role-playing hobby, as it were. And we went over to the States in 1976 to meet Gary Gygax, and we signed up a lot of other games companies at the time, Games Designers Workshop, KSM, mentioned companies like Rendir and Archive. And the funny thing is, John had left at this point because he only liked traditional board games, and Steve and I were now obsessed with Dungeons & Dragons. So we left off that, we left John, we put all my belongings in my girlfriend's at the time's flat. But we ordered lots of games at this convention, and the the postal address we gave was my girlfriend's flat, and so she wasn't very happy with all these boxes arriving. But we came back to the UK thinking, right, we now need an office, we need to get going with Dungeons and Dragons and all the other games we're importing. But we needed to get some money because we had no money. We had nowhere to live, no office, no money. So you go to the bank manager. Hello, my name's Ian, this is Steve. We are the UK distributors of Dungeons and Dragons. It's a role-playing game. Monsters and treasure. And go on these fantastic journeys in the night. I'm a barbarian and Steve's a wizard. And we have £10,000, please. And he looked at us, a bit like a dog watches television. Like he thought we were mad and he asked us to leave. And so that was a bit of a problem. So Steve and I ended up living in a van for 3 months, and we found a very small office in Shepherd's Bush at the back of the estate agents. But when you're young, which we were then, and living the dream effectively, we turned our hobby into a tiny business. We were just happy and smiling, so it didn't really matter. So that's how we met Gary Gygax. Gary Gygax is there. This is Steve smirking at the front. I'm holding those boxes, and you've got Fritz Lee, the science fiction author at that end. So it's a quite historic photo. Yeah. Yeah. So this is us selling in our little office at the back of the state agent, our first office of Dungeons and Dragons.
And now as you know, white dwarf.
Yes.
That's quite convenient. Printed magazines aren't what they used to be anymore. So what can you tell me? You know, this was key to the future success, and also a key resource for the community back then. It was like a Discord of yesteryear, right?
Yeah, it was a very big decision for us because we printed 25 issues of Owl and Wheel, the newsletter that I showed originally. But we realized that we needed to really up our game in quality. In the United States, TSR were publishing Dragon magazine, and we had to have a magazine that looked as professional as they did. So we took a very bold decision from moving to printing 200 amateur-looking Owl and Weasels a month to having to print 4,000 copies of White Dwarf #1 because to get the unit price down low enough to make it affordable. So that was a really big decision that could have made us go broke, but I'm delighted to say that they sold out, and this is the very first issue. So if you manage to get hold of a copy, they're going for quite a lot of money on eBay now. White Dwarf #1. It's a very strange colour. For some reason we had decapitation, but anyway.
Who decided the name of the magazine? Because it already embraced both fantasy and sci-fi.
That was the idea. I chose
White
that
Dwarf.
name. White Dwarf, obviously being a fantasy character and also an exploding star. Yeah.
In the space, huh?
Yeah. And we're also at a point in this little office in Shepherd's Bush that is just overflowing with parcels and people, and we needed to get a shop. And because we were at an estate agent, we said, well, can you find us a shop? Which we did. Again, this was in Hammersmith in London. This was the opening day in April 1978. And we were so relieved when so many people turned up for the opening of our shop. We found that other people enjoyed the games that we enjoyed, which was an amazing experience and feeling. And then, of course, we were importing miniatures from the United States, archived in Alpharta, which was very expensive. There was long delays in getting stock over from the USA, so we thought we should open our own miniature factory. And Brian Ansell, who was running Asgard Miniatures, came to us and said, I can be your solution. Let's start a new company together, which we did. So Citadel Miniatures, wholly owned by Games Workshop, but Brian Ansell was running in Nottingham. And it was pretty good really from day one. And he approached us because we were buying miniatures from him. He said, why do you keep buying 50 giant rats and 50 spiders and no regiments? He said, well, that's what happens in a role-playing game. So he said, okay, I'll be your solution. And of course, that ultimately led to the birth of Warhammer, because several years later, as I said from the beginning, we had a 3-year exclusive distribution agreement for Dungeons and Dragons. And Gary Gygax came over to see us in 1979 and said, the agreement's terminated, but we love you guys so much, we want to merge our company with Games Workshop. So the proposal was to TSR was to merge with Games Workshop. But Steve Jackson and I, being young and independent young Brits, said no to that merger because we didn't want to spend half our lives in the United States and half our lives in the UK, and we said no. Which of course meant that we lost exclusivity to Dungeons and Dragons. We remained the largest distributor because all the retailers were coming to us for not just Dungeons and Dragons, but for Chaos and for Games Designers Workshop, Citadel Miniatures, for White Wolf. So we had a very powerful distribution network, but we no longer were the exclusive distributors. So we felt quite vulnerable and realized we needed to create new games to replace Dungeons and Dragons. So we started off by publishing other US games under license. We developed our own board games like Talisman and Ghost Dread and Apocalypse and a whole raft of role-playing accessories. But we needed an IP that had the ability to scale to global audiences. And that, of course, came back with Warhammer. Now, Warhammer was released in 1983. Again, it was an idea from Brian Ansell, and he had previously designed a set of rules called Livingstone, but he wanted the more science fiction, science fantasy rather than just fantasy that we've been doing with role-playing games. And his argument was very strong, but weirdly, the idea was to give the rules away as a free leaflet in the mail orders from Citadel. And then people thought, well, this is actually a very good system. Why don't we expand them? So Brian brought in Rick Priestley and Richard Halliwell to expand what was just 2 pieces of paper into a full set of rules. And that became Warhammer Fantasy Battle, that was published in 1983. And then the second version came out a year later, then Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, until Rick Priestley took control and wrote Warhammer 40,000, which came out in 1987, with a whole bunch of miniatures to go with it. And of course, Warhammer 40K was ultimately became the signature game for Games Workshop.
It was a perfect blend of miniatures and narrative and strategy. So you saw that the audience was asking for something like that, like miniatures were the key to it.
Well, there's this eternal war with all these races, for the Emperor and all that. So it's amazing what they managed to achieve. And full credit has to go to Brian and Citadel Miniatures for developing that IP into what became a global franchise. And now, of course, you can see Workshop is licensing it to Amazon, and it's going to be on the big screen and on TV series. It's incredible. What started off as a piece of paper for a mail order giveaway becomes a global IP.
Big fan, yeah. Then you left the Games Workshop, but there is a book that tells...
Yes, I mean, just to finish off on Warhammer, that Games Workshop is now the public-facing. Games Workshop went onto the London Stock Exchange in 1993, and it's become even more successful than ever. And all the shops are being rebranded now as Warhammer shops. And, but Steve and I and Brian Ansell and the financial director, Keith Pinfold, we all left in a buyout in 1991, and then said Games Workshop was floated in 1993. But if you want to know more about the history I've just talked about, there's a book being one right here. Show it up, give everyone a look. Dice Man, which is the kind of a personal memoir of the early struggles of Games Workshop. And I'm delighted that came out. So that was the first chapter of my games life, but everything overlapped. We used to run these conventions called Games Day, and in Games Day 1979, a Penguin Books editor, Geraldine Cook, came along and was kind of confused and bemused by the thousands of people playing role-playing games, Dungeons and Dragons, etc., and asked Steve and I if we would write a book about the hobby. And we said, well, rather than writing a book about the hobby, why can't we write a book that allows you to experience a role-playing game? And she thought that was a great idea. And we didn't really know what we were talking about, but we said, yeah, we'll send in a synopsis. So we set about thinking, what could that be? We thought about a branching narrative, how you can simplify a role-playing experience into a branching narrative with the book replacing the Dungeon Master, and applying a game system to that, and creating a book which was no longer a passive experience where you read about other people, heroes, but this is an interactive experience in which you, the reader, are the hero, written in the second person present. The book asked you to make all the decisions. So the first title came out was The Warlock Fights Up Mountain in 1982. I said this is a book in which you are the hero. The books are broken into 400 numbered paragraphs, at the end of which you make a choice, turn left, turn right, do I open the chest or not? And when you find monsters, you roll dice to overcome those monsters. And those three attributes, again, simplifies role-playing with skill, stamina, and luck. And so people played and read their way through the book. They were hugely successful. There was no marketing, but the power of people talking to each other, the word of mouth in school playgrounds, connected all the schools together, and everyone in schools were talking about these incredible fighting fantasy game books. But the general media thought they were bad. For example, the Evangelical Alliance published an 8-page warning guide saying, because you're interacting with ghouls and demons, you're just bound to get possessed by the devil. A housewife, a worried housewife in deepest suburbia, phoned her local radio station and said that having read one of my books, her son levitated. So the kids listening thought, is that true? For £1.50 we can fly? That's amazing. So everyone rushed out and bought them. The local vicar for Penguin Books threatened to chain himself to the railings of Penguin Books until they were banned. There were church sermons where they were asking the congregation to burn the books. There was petitions sent in by parents, and I have a copy of the petitions. I know where they live. Asking them to burn the books. At the same time, teachers were saying, these are actually really good. They're great for reluctant readers. They're good for creative writing. They're good for critical thinking. They're good for literacy. These are amazing. Kids who don't read are now reading. But there was a complete disconnect between the media and those who know, i.e. the teachers. So they did incredibly well. And they sold something like 21 million copies globally. So what have I done wrong here?
Yeah, two things.
And just, 2 clicks. So we worked with some incredible artists. This was the cover of the first book, Peter Andrew Jones, because having run Games Workshop and being involved with Dungeons and Dragons, etc., we were aware how important art was to create the atmosphere in our books. The artists we used for White Dwarf magazine and some of our role-playing games. And Penguin Books were very worried. They'd signed up The Warlock Fights Up Mountain, but they were saying, well, this is a children's book. You need a cover with a toadstool and little gnome sitting on top, and butterflies, and a little frog giving a kiss. I said, no. What we need is a cover which is going to threaten to rip the faces off the readers, not the cover you're suggesting. But to their credit, they said, okay. So we used people like Peter Andrew Jones. For the internal illustration, we used Russ Nicholson. This is the new cover for the hardback, which was released today, from Karl Kopinski. He does lots of Magic the Gathering cards. Perhaps one of my most favorite artists, Ian McCaig.
Yes.
Who did the
perhaps the next one, spoiler alert, right?
Spoiler alert.
So, in the audience, do you see any resemblance with the art in the book in the middle? some villain in some other fantasy universe.
So Ian, I gave him his kind of first jobs. He also created the logo for Games Workshop.
Yeah.
But this character here is the main bad guy in City of Thieves.
Yeah.
This is Zambarbone, the Night Prince demon guy.
Who does him look like?
And with his spike cranium,
Yeah.
after this, Ian McCaig went to work for George Lucas and created Darth Maul. And I would say they are related. Definitely related.
They're cousins, yeah.
So that's Ian McCaig. So some of the best artists
Same artist.
started their life with fighting fantasy. Martin McKenna, sadly no longer with us, was a very influential artist I used a lot. For some of my covers and artwork, Chris Achilles, another amazing artist who sadly is no longer with us, did a lot of our covers. We used Brian Bolland, who did an awful lot of work on Judge Dredd. I commissioned to do the Judge Dredd board game. He also worked on Steve's book, The Cover for Appointment with Fear. Jim Burns, who's an incredible artist for science fiction, I used for Battle Cars, the Games Workshop game, and there goes my phone. And Freeway Fighter. There was also comics based on Freeway Fighter, which is fantastic. And of course, there are miniatures now based on some of the artwork that we've created over the years. So 21 million copies cold. They're still in print today. I'm very proud that they've survived the test of time. 43 years later, they're still going strong. And I'm delighted to say, Edward over here is going to give us a wave. He's publishing them in Spain. They're coming back in Spain after the job they did in Altair all those years ago. And I think the Kickstarter people are getting them in November, and they'll be at retail in December. So any questions for that, talk to Edward later. And this book, Magic Realms, is a kind of pictorial history of all the artists and art that we've used in fighting fantasy over those years.
We're fine. So 2 quick things about fighting fantasy. There are levitating kits, but I wanted to ask you which would be the best entry point for kids? I don't know, the less aggressive, the less gory.
Yeah.
Because I think it's fantastic for kids to start role-playing themselves.
Yes, well, children's imaginations are fantastic. They're not actually scared of anything. They know the difference between fantasy and reality. So I wouldn't be worried about children reading any of my books because they were perfectly happy in the 1980s. But if you want to start with one that is perhaps the least amount of combat, I'd say Forest of Doom.
All right.
Yeah.
And then the other one is a tip for young artists and writers that want to write fast and a lot. You had to write a ton of books in a short time span. So any tips for those that want to improve writing more efficiently?
No idea.
No idea. Just write a lot. Just go there.
Yeah. The thing is, you just have to do it, and you'll get better over time. I've never read any of the game books from any other author because I want to be true to myself and not be influenced by other people. So I try and rely on my own imagination and just be very self-critical, try and be original. So the writing these things is very difficult, by the way, because you're writing several stories at once. You've got to create a story that is meaningful and interesting. Then you have to start creating the branching narrative, keeping a record on a flowchart of where the adventure's going. Keeping a record of every split in the adventure, annotating each paragraph with what you can find there. Then you're having to balance it for difficulty, balancing it for the economy. And as you go, you realize you need stuff. So you come to create a doorway, you think, well, this should be locked, this door. Where's the key going to be? So you have to go back and put the key earlier in the adventure. So there's a lot of going forwards and backwards to try and create it. And then making sure that it doesn't kind of divide exponentially. You can never bring it back again. And you have to give key information at certain points so everyone will understand the stuff that you really want them to know. So it is a nightmare writing them, but it's a really enjoyable nightmare.
Yes, a really nice piece of advice. Let's move on into video games.
Yes. Well, I moved into video games first through design in 1984. A startup company called Domark came to me. Death Trap Dungeon was #1 in the bestsellers chart, and then Would I Write There launch product, which was Eureka. And when I sold out of Games Workshop in 91, I joined the company, realized it was too small, so we put 4 companies together to create a company that was called IDOS, which we floated on the London Stock Exchange. And because of my experience with Games Workshop, always wanted to have original content rather than licensed content. We set about publishing games that we owned the intellectual property in. And two of the ones I'm kind of most proud of was Tomb Raider and Hitman. Lara Croft was created by this Toby Gard, a 2D artist that's Core Design, the company we bought.
That is a Spanish surname.
Yes, you can see the first sketch here, it was called Lara Cruz. So you'd think it might be Spanish, but no, we thought that sounds not English. So somebody went through the phone book and found the name Croft and thought that sounds very English.
Croft.
So she was changed from Lara Cruz to Lara Croft. And Toby had seen the rise of girl power and Nina Cherry and these strong independent women. So he wanted this character to be a strong female character. And that's how Lara Croft came about. Mm-hmm. It was an incredible journey. We managed to publish a new game every year from 1996 all the way through PlayStation 1, a new one every year until PlayStation 2, and ultimately we had to move the development from the UK to Crystal Dynamics in the US because the technology and the size of the team required for the new platforms was becoming bigger and bigger. And sadly, Core weren't able to make that adjustment. So she became a pop culture phenomenon, getting into mainstream media, not just video games magazines, but the very first non-human to be on the cover of the Face magazine. There was all sorts of merchandise and licensing, and we licensed the film to Paramount. And I did get to meet Angelina Jolie a couple of times on the set. She was an incredible presence, super intelligent, amazing lady. Yeah, it was wow. And these are some of the models we used over the years. That's just a bit of fun. It's between shots, during a shoot at one of the reunion episodes we had. So yeah, I guess that's briefly my life gaming in 50 years. I know I'm conscious of the time. We have time
plenty
for Q&A.
of questions, but I think we'd rather have the audience ask you some questions directly. I will reserve my questions for me so that you guys have some time. So I think there is a mic. So if anyone wants to ask something about Lara Cruz or fighting fantasy, you can do it in Spanish. You can go Spanish.
That certainly helps me.
No, it's not.
I wanted to ask a question because I'm writing my own fantasy stuff. I've been doing that for more than 10 years now, doing a little world building, all that. I can't put it into paper. I have issues putting it because it doesn't feel alive anymore. It lives in my head and is there and is very vivid to me. And I've been making languages. I've been making races, cultures, maps, but a lot of it is in my head. I have a hard time putting it on. I'm too critical, and I don't know how to...
Well, you can't expect to dump it out of your head in one go, because you wouldn't know where to start. So I do a little bit of writing every day. When I'm traveling, I always have a notebook. If I think of something, or I'm inspired by something, I see a building, I see somebody, I just make a note. And then those notes turn into paragraphs, and those paragraphs turn into chapters, and then those chapters turn into an interactive book. So it's a process. You have to release it. Just let it go. put it on the paper, and then you can play with it. You can't keep it all in your head. You'll never be able to do anything with it.
Yeah.
Just-
Thank you.
There you go.
I have a question for you. Fighting Fantasy, it's a live series, and I would like to ask you what can we expect for the future? What is next in Fighting Fantasy series?
Well, I always say when I've finished my last book, well, that's that then, finished. Never again. And then about a month later, you have an idea, think, oh, I'll make a good idea. So I'm working on another one, and hopefully it'll be coming out next year. But we also have an event in the UK called Fighting Fantasy Fest. It's not a huge event. It's some 400 people who are kind of dedicated Fighting Fantasy fans, and we have some artists and some of the authors and to come along, and we just indulge ourselves in a day of nostalgia and fun.
Hello.
Hello.
I just wanted to ask if you still play Dungeons and Dragons.
Briefly, I would say the answer is no. Not because I don't want to, it's finding time and people to do it. I've played in a couple of guest appearances with being invited to get filmed. I still, Amvar the Barbarian is still waiting. He's still on the shelf. I still have the miniature. But we play board games more these days. When you get to our age, trying to commit 6 hours to a game session without falling asleep is challenging. So we play kind of mid-tier German strategy games these days rather than hardcore role-playing. But also, I enjoy the creative process in that genre as much as I do playing. So writing Fighting Fantasy game books is effectively me playing a Dungeons and Dragons adventure in terms of what you're creating.
Hi. Were you involved in the 2010s remake trilogy of Tomb Raider? And what do you think of it?
Of the game?
The remake trilogy in 2013?
No.
3 Tomb Raider games?
Well, I was aware of it, of course, but I wasn't involved because it was all done in Palo Alto in Crystal Dynamics. So we were long-range influencers, but not on a day-to-day level.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Hello. When you received these first wood grain boxes from TSR from the US, what was the reason you didn't just resold them and you went and published a UK version of the game? Was there a different sensibility?
No, we didn't get the wood grain. We got the white box. This was February '75. We only got one copy, a review copy from Brian Bloom and Gary, who's Gary Gygax's business partner, and we played it, became obsessed with it. So we ordered 6 copies, and we sold those 6 copies through Alan Weasel magazine, and that's how we started our mail order business.
Why did you publish a UK version of the game instead of just getting more boxes from...
Oh, later on, well, it's not efficient to keep importing because you've got, as you know today with all the tariffs, there's import duties and delays in shipment, and the orders were getting bigger and bigger, so it was made much more economic sense and logistic sense to print 5,000 copies or 2,000 copies, which we stored in our warehouse and could... If somebody ordered it, they could have it tomorrow rather than having to wait, several weeks.
All right. So it was no adaptation, like you changed words and
No, we
style.
didn't. It was just exactly how it was.
Thank you.
Hi. So you are a legend in this world, in the games, board games, role-play games. What is your opinion about what's happening during the last 50 years with role-playing? For example, if you remember the first edition, the old edition, old school of Dungeons and Dragons, and right now with this new fifth edition, where you have some kind of this woke respect for everybody. So the race, they are mixed. So the orcs, they are not evil.
Yeah.
So everybody must be a good person. So what's your opinion about what's going on in these last 10 years?
Well, I think life was simpler when I was young. The bad guys can be the bad guys, and but I mean, you have to be respectful of the age you're living in. So if this is the consensus of global opinion, that's the way it is. We no longer play it anymore, but when I'm writing a Fighting Fantasy game book, I don't think I've changed my style at all. I think we were very aware of sensibilities even back there. We never assumed, for example, that the reader was male. We wrote them, went to great efforts to make sure you could not assume it was a male character. So if you were greeted by an NPC, it would say, hello, stranger, or good morning, adventure. It didn't say, hello, young man. So I think Steve and I have always been conscious of the obligations required to serve entertainment material on a global basis. So, but what's happening with the role-playing systems, it's not really for me to comment, I don't think. It's not how I would have played it then, but I don't play D&D anymore, so there we are.
Time for 2 more, I think.
Hi, Mr. Livingstone. We're very excited to know that someone like Henry Cavill will soon be directing a Warhammer series on Prime Video. Is there anything curious, anything great that we could expect?
Well, as you know, I'm no longer connected with Games Workshop. I'm in the same seat as you are watching what they do. Because I'm very encouraged that he's a big player himself. So it's in the hands of somebody who understands it, because Hollywood in the past has had a tendency to take an intellectual property and do their usual own thing with it. Yeah. But now Hollywood have finally understood that the games audience must be respected. The games audiences are huge. Like, for example, there's over 3 billion video games players. And I think the marker was set by HBO in the way they did a really great job with adapting The Last of Us from a very successful video game into a TV series. And hopefully that will inspire and encourage other Hollywood companies to do the same for any board game, role-playing game, or video game that they decide to put into a linear experience on the silver screen. So in the hands of Henry Cavill, and I know for sure that Games Workshop will have a huge decision-making process in the kind of content they will be allowed to put out there. So I think the signs are very, very encouraging, I would say.
Thank you.
I would
More
say,
at the front.
I would say time for the last one, I think.
Well, this man holding my book, you've got to give him a chance.
Yes, of course. Sorry about that. Yeah. No book, no question.
Okay, Ryan, I have a question because I don't know how it was when you acquired the box, but you played a campaign setting like Greyhawk, or you made your own setting?
Made my own.
And you have think to publish it?
I still have it.
I will play it.
It's in the book.
It's here.
There's a map in there. You've not read it.
You just bought it. Just
take the microphone off him. Give it to this guy.
And the book.
No, it's called Sanctum of the Sixth Province. There's a big map in there.
Okay.
I can't remember which page. But
I read the book very fast because I acquired.
It's a very big picture.
And well, but this book is very difficult to find in Spain. So
it's very difficult to find anywhere.
I will tell it to him.
He's going to publish it.
It's very, very good. Well, and I don't know if...
Yeah, one more.
Yeah, we can do that. We can definitely
One
do
more.
that.
Just one more.
What
más.
a pleasure.
Una
It's
más.
a pleasure to have you here, Mr. Livingstone. I only want to know which of the fighting fantasy titles is your favorite.
That's a bit like asking me which is my favorite child, and I have 4.
I have 2. She's my favorite.
No one will ever admit to their favorite.
The other is
So I'm going to give you 4 books. The Warlock Fire Top Mountain, because the first one, and I wrote it with Steve Jackson, so it's very emotional. The first one, when you see it in the bookshop, wow, that's incredible. Second is Death Trap Dungeon. Third is City of Thieves. And the fourth is probably Forest of Doom.
Thank you.
In no particular order.
It was a joke.
Fantastic.
And my favorite child is...
Yeah. I think we can wrap it here. Sorry, I think we ran out of time. Again, congratulations on the 50th anniversary, and congratulations on the new releases that we are seeing, also in Spanish in Spain. Thank you so much for being here. I always meet you in beautiful places in Spain.
Yeah.
There's something to Spain and you, and
I love Spain. I tell you, I used to live here. I had to live here for over a year once.
It's an
Gracias
absolute
por
pleasure.
todo. Thank you.